This podcast explores the spiritual and metaphysical world through the experiences and opinions of the host and those interviewed, and therefore should not necessarily be seen as direct endorsement or personal advice to our listeners. We encourage you to use your own discretion, judgment, and intuition regarding anything you learn of through this show.
Welcome to the very first episode of Let's Get Metaphysical.
In our first episode, Ren travels to Abadiânia, Brazil, and sheds light on the internationally renowned medium and healer known as João de Deus, or John of God, by sharing their own experience at his spiritual healing center, the Casa de Dom Ignacio de Loyola, and through interviews with several people that have worked closely with medium João over many years. But first, let's introduce you to our host.
I'm Renata Maniaci, and I'm so thrilled to be here. Our show explores metaphysics, the intersections of science and spirituality, and the ways in which the world we see is really only the tip of the iceberg. Let's Get Meta will dive into topics that span the metaphysical world through interviews with fascinating people who are doing powerful and interesting work in widely unseen and unrecognized realms. Through their stories, we'll discover a vast range of different beliefs and practices that shape our connections to the spiritual and the metaphysical world. To start our journey together, we decided to share a two-part episode taken from my recent visit to Brazil to see John of God and his Casa de Dom Ignacio de Loyola, lovingly referred to as the Casa. We will also meet three truly remarkable individuals close to John of God who I was lucky enough to interview while I was there. Part 1 focuses on John of God and his work at the Casa, through my own experiences there and through the eyes of Josie Raven, Granny McEntee, and Heather Cumming. Part 2 focuses more closely on Josie, Heather, and Grania. You will not want to miss what they have to say about their lives and work in Brazil. I should note that there were some minor technical and sound issues during the on-location recording for the interviews, so please bear with anything that sounds slightly rough. So, are you ready? Then let's get meta.
So, John of God, or as his name is in Portuguese, João de Deus, is a name that was actually given to him out of respect for the work that he does and his connection to the divine.
Josie Raven has been leading groups to see John of God since 1998. She was the first North American guide to take people to visit the Casa in Abadiânia, Brazil. As of February 2018, Josie has taken 149 groups from around the world to experience John of God's healing work. She is also the author of a book on John of God called The Book of Miracles, The Healing Work of João de Deus.
John of God was born in the early 1940s in a very rural area of Brazil in a very poor family. He came into this life apparently already with some fairly strong psychic gifts. He had a vision of Santa Rita come to him, or Saint Rita. And in Brazil, she's known as the patroness of miracles or of the impossible. She came to him first as the form of a beautiful glowing lady, and then a bit later as a ball of light.
Granny McEntee is a longtime resident of Abadiânia. She works in one of what are known as the current rooms at the Casa, and she owns and operates a little restaurant called Café Central with her husband João, not to be confused with João de Deus.
Medium João talks about her with such grace and awe and wonder, and as an 8-year-old boy, why me? She told him of his mission and warned him to go on a beautiful day, a sunny day, to go and warn the next town with his mother who was with him, and he was transfixed and his mother didn't know what was happening. And then when he came out of the vision, he said to his mother, I've been instructed by this beautiful lady who identified herself as Saint Rita of Cassia, Italy, and we're here in Brazil, to go to the next town and warn them of a storm coming, which came, and the town was devastated. So this was the first part of his mission.
Today, people travel to visit Medium João for a wide variety of reasons. Some seek support in healing mental, emotional, and physical issues, while some seek personal or spiritual development, and others are simply curious.
He came in very attuned in that kind of way already. She told him that he had a mission and that it was time to start, and that there were people waiting for him in a nearby spiritual center. he grew up in a very traditional Catholic family, but on the other hand, he had these gifts. And so when Santa Rita gave him that advice, he went off down the road to this center. And
is this a spiritist center?
Was a spiritist center. Spiritism is the main metaphysical path in Brazil and is becoming more widely known in the U.S. and throughout Europe as time goes by. But it has to do with the spirit realm, with mediums who are intermediaries between the spirit realm and this world, and some aspects also about reincarnation and what happens to the human spirit when we leave this realm and go on in our eternal journey into the other realms. So he went to this spiritist center and knocked on the door, and that was apparently the last thing he remembered for hours. And when he came back to normal consciousness again, he thought he had fainted because he'd hardly eaten for days. And there was this huge crowd around him, and some people were weeping. And he said, "Oh, please don't worry about me. I haven't eaten, and I probably just passed out." And they were saying, "No, that's not what happened." They said, "You went into a trance state, and a spirit came through you and announced himself as King Solomon, like 3,000 years ago, and proceeded to do these miraculous healings for all of us who were here." Here's this young Catholic boy, half-starved and didn't really know what to make of this group, but they seemed nice, and they fed him and invited him in to spend the night there. And then the next morning, the director of the center had apparently announced to the whole town what had happened, and he took John of God into their main meeting room. There were hundreds of people there, and announced that this was the young medium, João de Deus, and that he had incorporated the spirit of King Solomon, and that they were hoping that it would happen again and that he could do more healing. This time, they started by saying the Lord's Prayer and the Hail Mary because of the predominant Catholicism here. And as they were praying, this time John of God was aware of starting to feel a little bit dizzy, and then he described it as floating off into this golden realm where he just rested, and that it was very nice there. And then at some point later, which turned out it was hours later, he felt himself drawn back into his physical form awareness, and once again there were all these people weeping and thanking him.
Wow.
And so that was the beginning of his work.
A major part of the work that John of God does involves incorporating, or in other words, serving as a medium or host for the many various entities that, through him, facilitate the healing at the casa.
So because this took place in Brazil, where Spiritism is so well known, he was taught about Spiritism after that so that he could understand what was happening to him in the context of what these people understood.
Right.
Somebody said to me once here, one of the volunteers at the casa, it would be interesting to know what he would have been called if this had happened in India, if he'd been born there and he had gone into trance and something else like that. They might have called him the reincarnation of so-and-so, or we partly have to look at it, I feel, in a cultural context where mediumship is very well known, although there are few mediums in Brazil's history who have treated so many people as he has. It's been millions over the last 60 years. There are about several dozen entities, they call them here spirits of light, over the decades have taken turns incorporating in him, meaning what happens, he goes away consciously and another spirit uses his physical form to be able to speak through to us, because otherwise most people can't hear spirits, so it's very convenient for them and for us
that we
can actually have little conversations with them through John of God.
Heather Cumming has been a group leader and translator for John of God for 18 years and travels with him when he leaves the country. It was Heather who translated the well-known interview between John of God and Oprah. Heather is the author of John of God, the Brazilian healer who has touched the lives of millions. And in addition to working at the Casa, she also runs her own pousada, or hotel, in Abadiânia.
The word entity in Portuguese, let's say it's a spirit of light, an evolved spirit of light is when we're referring to the word entity. It's an entity of light, a being of light, an evolved being of light that is using him as an instrument for the work. So they're talking to us, their personality change, their color of their eyes change, quality of the hair, depending on that particular spirit that is communicating through him.
We know a little bit about some of them were Brazilian doctors, and then there are many, probably thousands and thousands of these entities who do not incorporate through John of God, but who are there at the Casa, his healing center in Brazil, working on the many thousands of people who come every day, and also on the photos of people that many of those people bring, like photos of friends and relatives who want healing but who are not able to come to Brazil at that time. And so then these entities continue working on all the people who are physically here and all the people whose photos were sent for indeterminate months and maybe longer when they leave here. So it's quite a huge operation, actually, and it's really beautiful.
It has to take a toll on him. What effect does incorporation have on his body?
I think the incorporation, is something that he welcomes always, because then he's totally immersed in his work and his mission. The entities, it's something that he's lived all his life with, really, since he was a little boy.
You're so in tune with him, it seems. Do you know who he incorporates?
A lot of the time, not always. Not always, because it could be a different one. We can ask the entity and they may not want us to know, or sometimes they'll tell us. There are certain ones that we get to know because they come through a lot and it's their personality and their way of being. But then once again, we could be surprised by that and say, "Are you?" And the entity might say, "No." And I always think, I don't like to categorically say who the entity is, because I also like to think that that entity is overseeing the work. But the work, as the entities say, are being done also by their phalange, their group consciousness. That when we're waiting in the hall, there are many thousands of entities of light that are working with us and around us and helping us. And so I don't like to get caught on who's actually incorporated, but rather all the entities of light who are helping us, so that one's not caught too much on that particular one, because it could have been a mixture. Even myself, I don't like to specifically, although, certain ones at the beginning worked more with me, that I like to, I don't want to, let's say, leave anybody out.
Sure. That's reasonable.
Disrespect anybody.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
One of the other very well-known spirits that comes through him from time to time, besides King Solomon, is Saint Ignatius of Loyola, who was the founder of the Jesuit order back in the 1500s.
Dom Ignacio, St. Ignatius of Loyola, I didn't know anything about him before I came here. I've seen him incorporated in medium Joao's body. His eyes change colour. Medium Joao's eyes are blue, and Dom Ignacio's are brown. He takes on his attributes, his limp, because he was hit by a cannonball, which led to his conversion in the Battle of Pamplona 500 years ago. So he limps markedly, medium Joao, when he carries this, and he's a very big energy and very compassionate. So, of course, I made it my business to know who these entities are that I'm working with every day. And it's not just Wednesday to Friday, which is the days that Casa work. They are 24/7. And once you ask them to help, they come in and they help.
It's such a comfort to me that they know what I need, in which order I need it.
So they have this massive group consciousness working on the higher planes that come down here to do the work on Earth to help us. They are benevolent beings. They are their sole job is to come here when they're called. You need to ask for help. You can't just say, "Why don't they come? I said, well, have you asked?
Yeah.
You know, ask and you'll receive. We are working with the Christ consciousness in the Casa, King David, King Solomon, and Jesus. And right down Dom Ignacio. They're all the house of David, the Christ consciousness. King David is Jesus' great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaddy. And it's interesting when you go in the lines in the Casa, we have our own agenda, we have our questions ready. There's God's plan and our plan.
Right.
God's plan works and ours doesn't.
Right.
And more, the entity working in Medium Joao's body is speaking the words to you that you are just about to speak to him.
Right.
I speak Portuguese now, so I don't need an interpreter, thank you. So I go directly to him. I look into his eyes where the communication is and the mirror of the soul, and that's where the answers lie. And 9 times out of 10, he says what I am just about to say.
Wow.
Anybody who comes here is receiving the healing. They don't discriminate. You know,
Right.
God doesn't say, oh, God, you're not Catholic. There's no dogma here. The beauty of the Casa is that Medium Joao comes out regularly and says, this Casa is a universal house of love. All creeds, all colours, all belief systems, and in particular, those of you without belief are welcome here. No one is discriminated against. This is the house of love, the medicine is love, and every being deserves to be healed, whether we have a body or not.
The work of the Casa really supports people finding their spiritual identity. You know, who am I really? I'm not just this body. I'm not just my thoughts. I'm something more than this. And helping us to really connect more and more to our divine nature.
I've traveled a lot with him and his wife and the team that travels with him. Been to Australia, New Zealand, Germany and Austria and America. Being abroad, I think, is, well, you can imagine, you know, you're in another country and you don't speak the language. So he's very dependent on, you know, the close team working with him. I always think how it would be if suddenly he turned around and he's in the middle of an airport, you know, and none of us are there. So I kind of glue on to him.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to another country. He loves it. And when he's there, he doesn't do any sightseeing or anything. He stays and he holds the space for the 3-4 days. And then he's anxious to come back, always to come back. This year I did manage to take him for a couple of days to Disney.
Yes.
And for his little daughter too, she loved it, and so did his wife.
Oh, good.
I've been trying to do that for many years. We've ticked that off the bucket list now.
That's
but it's difficult for him when he's traveling abroad for an event. It's very important for him to come back because he's still carrying the energy of the event. And then he's able to, you know, to come back here, and he worries about how the Casa is and not letting anybody down here, you know. That would be here. Of course, the entities are working here as well. It's very powerful here when he's not here. And then sometime in 2007, I believe it was, John of God and the entity asked me to organize an event in America, and I didn't really want to because it's such a responsibility. But at the entity's insistence, I realized then at Omega, who had approached me before, that would be a wonderful place. I knew the campus, and the directors of Omega are all very open to such a very different type of experience that they've ever had, and to really closing down everything 3-day John of God event.
For any who may be unfamiliar with them, the Omega Institute is a nonprofit educational organization located on a beautiful campus outside of Rhinebeck, New York. Their website describes their purpose as providing hope and healing for individuals and society through innovative educational experiences that awaken the best in the human spirit. Over 1 million visitors have come to Omega seeking to grow, learn, and find a greater purpose in their lives.
Each year that has been smoother and easier. I know John of God likes going there, and that's been a wonderful experience, and very grateful to the Omega staff and campus.
I didn't realize that you were the one that organized Omega all those years ago. That's wonderful.
And so each year it's a little easier because, you know, we have a wonderful template now. Coming here, it's a wonderful experience for people to, I think, have an experience at, say, Omega. And then for the deeper work, the entity always says, come to Brazil if you can. People usually find that something happens, that they're able to make the journey. And so deep work happens there, and then a continuity if one can come. I think you've probably noticed that from your experience, that being here, you're really being able to immerse yourself in the energies, in the process, and really integrating that without getting busy immediately. Through that silence, we receive the subtle messages from our higher selves, if you will,
Right.
what we need to do to support the work, because we have to change, otherwise the same pattern will continue. The entities are doing the work, but it's, we have to change in order to support that, otherwise, it can slip back into an old habit. And so to be able to write that down, or to be able to say, I'm willing to either, rest more, or change our diets, or change the words we put out, the words we think, that might be our output, yes, thinking thoughts of no hope, or helpless, or judgmental to ourselves or others. And if we can change those to thank you, God and the entities of light, for the healing I know I'm receiving in every moment, the health and wellness has been restored, but then it's a more positive way of looking at things.
And a higher vibration, and that just lends itself more towards the healing process, I think. I mean, when is the last time that, maybe not you, Heather, but when's the last time any of us took 24 hours and laid in bed with our eyes closed, ever?
Right.
And not being sick, not being,
Right.
well, some folks are definitely, we're all in varying levels of health here, I think, the folks that visit Abadiania, but
Yes.
for myself, not being ill, and laying in bed for 24 hours with my eyes closed, when has that happened for me? And I'm somebody who takes self-care very seriously, and I work it into my life every day, and that's something I work into my clients' lives every day, hopefully, but never 24 hours. And somebody once told me about, human being and human doing. We're doing all the time, but taking that opportunity that the Casa tells us to do after an intervention and just being.
Yes. Yeah. Listening, being, feeling. And if it's difficult for us, then we need to look at why is it difficult for us. The work here is very profound, and I think the more that people can truly immerse themselves in it and not get too busy socializing, especially at the weekend. My groups, I don't take them away anywhere for the weekend, because the weekend we can use for, meditation, going to the waterfall, and just resting.
In addition to actually passing before John of God while he is incorporated, visitors to the Casa also supplement their healing process by having crystal baths and visiting a sacred waterfall nearby for energetic cleansing.
Could you give just like a fairly simple overview of what it is like to come and down here to Abadiania, and what is it like to go to the Casa, and how do you see John of God, and what can happen once you're there?
This is one area where having a guide is very helpful the first time, because there are a variety of kinds of protocols and treatments that go on as part of the work here, and it can be confusing if you don't know where to start. Generally, what happens for a person, once they get here, they get settled in, and with me, I try and explain the various processes before we start going through them. I would say for most people, because it's a long trip to get here and people are still kind of tired the first week, and there's a lot you have to learn the first week, that 2 weeks is kind of an ideal minimum to stay, to really take full advantage of it. The typical path, and sometimes this changes a bit, but the typical path is that John of God works Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of each week, and then he and us get a break over the weekend. It's more for us to kind of integrate everything that's happened and to do some other related Casa processes. But so typically a person would go to the Casa their first Wednesday morning here for their first session, and there are different lines that are formed depending on if you've never been here and never sent a photo here prior to coming, or if you've been here, etc. So you would get in one of the lines, and with me I would translate, and you would file from the main hall through the meditation, or what they call current rooms, because there's a current of energy that is generated not only by the entities, but all the people sitting in there praying and lending some of their energy to support the work at that session. And people have had very profound experiences just sitting for a few hours in those rooms with their eyes closed, with their attention turned inward. Sometimes people have big emotional releases. Other times they just feel this inner stillness and peace that is so wonderful. Other times they may get in touch with some more stuff that they need to let go of. And you would file through the second room where John of God is sitting, already incorporated by whichever entity decided they wanted to be the first of the day. And you would have a brief opportunity standing in front. Now, you're standing in front of John of God's body, but people have to understand it's really not John of God. By then, it is a spirit speaking through him. And it's confusing because it still looks kind of like John of God, although his appearance can shift a bit. But anyway, so there is a brief opportunity to talk about what your most pressing issues are that you would like help for. So it could be mental, emotional, physical, and or spiritual. And for some people, they also come with family issues and problems, marital, whole family, extended family, sometimes work issues. It's pretty broad what you can ask for help for here. And then it's kind of like going to your first doctor's visit. So he's already seen you energetically and spiritually, and so he will give you your recommendation for your healing process. So he might tell you to have what's called a spiritual intervention, and he would tell you which day and which morning or afternoon. The spiritual interventions used to be called spiritual surgeries. They've since changed that because I think partly because when people hear the word surgery, they automatically think of something physical only, and usually they think of physical instruments. And so I think the name was changed so that it had a broader meaning for people. So they didn't think it was just one kind of thing going on.
Or just in the physical. It could also be emotional, mental, spiritual. Right.
And so then, say a person was told to have one of these spiritual interventions, then on the day and the morning or the afternoon that they were told to have one, they would come back to the casa and they would go, when their turn was called, they would go with everybody else that was having their intervention that session and sit in this room and close their eyes. And John of God isn't even in the room when it begins. But all of these casa entities come into the room, and each person gets their own team of entities who are specialists in the areas that they need help in. So say it was somebody with cancer, there would be an entity that specialized in oncology working on them. It was family issues, they would have like a kind of family counselor entity working on the issues. If it was, well, it's just kind of endless between the physical. They might have a psychiatric entity if you had psychiatric issues. And so everybody would have their own team, and the entities, as soon as you sat down in the room and closed your eyes, they would begin working first through your energy body and then deeper into your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. I mean, the terms are, it's the best we can do to describe it because we really aren't segmented beings like that. We're a whole being, but we kind of identify these different aspects. So
it helps us to be able to understand in our own frame of mind in this dimension, like, oh, this could be physical, this could be mental. Yeah.
Right.
But we're really a whole, holistic being.
Yeah. At some point, it could be 5 minutes after you sit down, or it could be 30 minutes or an hour later, John of God, the man, receives, where he's sitting in his office, he somehow psychically receives communication from the entities that they're finishing up the last of the interventions. And so he comes from his office into the intervention or surgery room, and sometimes by the time he gets in there, he's already incorporated by one of the entities. Sometimes he needs a minute or two. He'll start saying a prayer, and halfway through the prayer, you can feel him shift, and suddenly it's not him, the man, it's the entity speaking. And he makes an announcement that the interventions have been completed and everybody can leave and go to their rooms, the hotel, or if they have a home here. And then you spend 24 hours in recovery by yourself, sleeping as much as you can. And then after that, there are different protocols, but that's kind of an overview. And what's really fascinating to me is that we have had people who have gone and had x-rays after these interventions where nobody physical has touched them, and on the x-rays it has shown up incision and actual sutures inside their bodies, which is pretty remarkable. And other things too. I mean, we've had people with cancer. It looks in the x-ray or whatever they take that something is still there, but the entities have actually somehow encapsulated it so that it can't spread any further, and then the cells inside start dying off, and then it shrinks and disappears and things like that. I had one man come who regrew knee cartilage, which is supposed to be impossible. I mean, there's just a lot of things that, in terms of the understanding of science and medicine, nobody can figure out how it happens, but it happens. And for some people, they have what you would call very rapid cures that we would call miraculous. For other people, it's over time, and sometimes they have to come back again for additional work. But still, if you look at things that medicine can't do anything about, and it is healed over time, whether little or long, it's still pretty remarkable either way. And we are expected to do our part in participating in our healing in terms of going within ourselves and looking for different patterns that we may have been carrying around for a long time that may be contributing to our ill health, and by changing them, we could support our own healing. It's participatory. It's not just you come here for a quick fix, which is what Americans always hope for.
Right.
Give me a pill quick and fix me up.
Yeah.
It's more in depth than that, because we're more complex, we're more multi-layered, and if a person really wants healing on a broader scheme than just fixing a symptom, then it's a deep process, mostly of letting go. It's like the peeling off the skins of the onions, letting go of more and more of that which really doesn't serve us, like guilt and resentment and fear and lack of forgiveness and judgment towards ourselves or others, all the usual culprits.
Yeah.
You know?
And this brings up something that a lot of folks don't understand, is that a lot of times when we have physical symptoms, really there's a spiritual root. So even if you got a pill which helped with the physical, you're really not rooting out the spiritual roots of it that kind of took hold and wormed their way down to the physical. And here seems to be a place where they really get at the spiritual, so that everything else can trickle down into what we experience as the physical body.
I would say that a lot of people aren't able to actually dive right into the spiritual component of it. They usually have to go through mental and emotional layers first of what's contributed to their physical symptoms, for example. And then the more that all that gets released, then finally we can get down to our spiritual nature.
You run, well, how would you say, the medium's room?
Yeah, the first room in the casa.
In the afternoons.
Yeah, if anybody told me I'd be doing that work, praying, very loaded, yeah, a loaded word.
Sure.
It's impossible. I have been taught and continue to be open to learning all the time. We are transmuting energy in the room. It's the cleansing room of the casa. So we sit in meditation, if you like. It's more than meditation. It's a collective consciousness that we have to have our bodies open, our hands apart, feet apart. Our eyes are closed so that we connect with our spiritual eyes, because our physical eyes are so limited. So we sit in down in meditation, if you like, to use that word. And when we close our physical eyes, we open our spiritual eyes. So we're connecting with our spirit and we're multiplying this high vibration as much as we can. I remind people to breathe because it keeps them alive. And also, breathing brings us into our heart center and also brings in peace. You know, when we breathe heavy or when we're distressed, we tend to have short, fast breaths, and it brings a lot of anxiety. So we encourage everybody just to connect with the life force, the breath, and to breathe slowly and do the best we can. I mean, in there, our minds wander, and we pray to bring people back into the heart center. So basically, that's what my job is in there. And as we open our hearts, a lot of the prayers come with messages, if you like. I mean, we don't only do the Our Father and the Hail Mary, and I don't do it all the time. There's a beautiful prayer that Medium Joao uses to incorporate the prayer of Caritas. So we open the work with that because it opens the portal. It's divine love, and love is all there is, and love never ends. So this prayer opens the portal because it's asking for help from the other side, which is what praying is. We're opening up a dialogue with the Creator, the architect of the cosmos, asking him, her, it, to come and alleviate our suffering and to transmute our denser energies. And when we give from our open hearts in this room and multiply our vibration, we're helping to cleanse everybody who's coming in the lines to see Medium Joao. And basically, that's what we're doing in there, cleansing their energy fields, helping through our openness and willingness to be healed and to help serve in service to our brothers and sisters, because in giving you receive. Then everybody's winning, and towards the end of the work, it depends, sometimes it's 2 hours, sometimes it's 5 hours. Why do you do that, God?
Like on Friday morning when I was in current.
I know, I mean, really, you never know.
You don't know.
It's a surrendering. Give me patience, Lord, but hurry up. So we're learning all these lessons for whatever reason. And then towards the end of the work, we receive this deep cleansing.
And then there's something called the crystal baths, which, just to be brief, there's these machines that John of God was inspired to have built by the entities. They gave him this idea. At the time he was doing it, nobody else had them. Now there are a lot of people that do kind of similar things, but his idea was inspired from the entities. And it's just basically a horizontal bar with 7 very clear crystals with colored light coming through them in different pulsing rhythms. And the theory behind it is because the crystals are aimed at each of what are called our 7 chakras, which are energy centers, that this healing process helps balance the chakras and all of our energy meridians. And then because it's a casa process, the entities also come in and work on the people as they're having their crystal baths. It's not a water bath, it's an energy bath. And more there are people that are now purchasing these crystal bed apparatuses and taking them back to their communities. And we've heard many stories of wonderful healings from people who have offered their crystal beds to others and used them themselves all over the world. So that's another part. And then the final part or aspect is the casa is in a very small town. Abidjan is a small town in rural Brazil. And so there's beautiful, I'm looking out at them now, trees and hills and valleys surrounding. I mean, it's so peaceful and beautiful. And down in the valley just behind the casa is some land that John of God has been the guardian of for many decades. And there's a beautiful little waterfall there. And so we have to get permission from the entity from who's incorporated in John of God when we go through the line to be able to go down there. And it's always best to go with a guide your first time so that you know what you're doing. And then you stand under this beautiful little waterfall, and again you concentrate on letting go of your issues, your stuff that you've been carrying around that doesn't serve you anymore. And so there are, of course, beautiful nature energies there, and butterflies and the waterfall, and also many of the entities of the casa come and help us while we're under the waterfall. And it's so interesting because every person who comes here is unique. And for one person, their intervention may be the most powerful experience here. For another, it might be the waterfall. For another, it might be a crystal bath that they have here, or sitting in current. Or just, it might happen in their hotel room, sitting here, because the entities are working on us 24 hours a day the whole time we're here. So even in your room, you can have big experiences.
Yeah. Like some of the folks in our group this week.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Like the waterfall, because I usually say to people to visualize a waterfall, both in Portuguese and English, so that we're open to receive this very cleansing high vibration that comes down and is showered upon us, cleaning up all of our energy fields and transmuting our denser energy so that none of this energy sticks. And also when we go physically to the waterfall, we come out. I've never heard anybody come out saying that was crap. Oh, what a load of rubbish. There's nothing happening here.
Oh, man. No, it's
I mean, it's amazing energy. And of course, the waterfall is called the Waterfall of Lazarus. And
coming back to life.
Yeah, coming back to life. And that's what you feel when you come out of the waterfall.
Yeah.
And there is a heart in the waterfall, in the root system of the tree.
We went to see it today.
Did you see it?
Absolutely. We looked for exactly what you said, and it really does look like a heart.
It's a heart.
In the heart system.
The right, left ventricle, whatever. I mean, a heart. I went there with a doctor, and she almost fell into it. She couldn't believe. She said, "Who put that there?" I said, "Well, it's the root system of the tree, the aorta." So that's what it's all about in our world here on planet Earth, and we're a very small planet, really. Say you go to a hospital in the Western world, and there's a lot of drugs taking to numb the body. People who are addicted to prescription medication. If you want to get sick, go in and visit somebody in a hospital who is sick, because you pick up superbugs or whatever. Here, the Casa is a spiritual hospital. So we are working on there's a lot of physical healings, spiritual healing, emotional, mental healing. So it basically is the same thing, but it's just lighter. You come here, you feel lighter. The treatment is the herbs, go to the waterfall, which is fabulous.
I went there last time this morning.
It's beautiful. You're being cleansed, mind, body, and spirit. The water is going through crystal. So it's crystal clear vision, crystal clear energy, and all your denser energy has been replaced by this new, fresh, light energy, you know. All the rainbows come through. I've been down there in the afternoon when the sun is shining on the water, and it's just rainbows.
It looked like that this morning.
It's
and
beautiful.
We were there at like 8:45 still.
Yeah. So this is really powerful. And all of them, crystal beds, really beautiful, because all the chakras are the color of the rainbow, and the crystal comes in and magnetizes your energy field and transmutes the energy. So it's all very basic. We're working with natural elements, crystal, passion flower.
Another aspect of the Casa work is most people are prescribed the herbs of the Casa, and everybody gets the same herb physically, which is passiflora in a fairly low dose, very pure. And they come in little capsules, and what's interesting is, well, people go, well, you've got passiflora and I've got passiflora, you know, what's the big deal? But what happens is when you go to the Casa pharmacy to get your prescription of passiflora herbs. I know this may sound a little out there, but probably not more than what I've already said, which is there are a group of the Casa entities that hang out at the pharmacy, and their specific mission is when you get your bottle or bottles of herbs, they actually infuse it with energy for your specific needs. And so the passiflora, for whatever reason, John of God and the entities decided that passiflora was a good, base for carrying the energy that they infuse it with. And so I could never take your herbs that were prescribed for you, and because it would be taking somebody else's medicine.
Right.
And we've had over the years a few people got their herbs mixed up with their spouses and started taking them and started feeling really weird because they had the wrong medicine.
Right.
So I always tell people, label your own bottle of herbs, especially if you live with other people, so that you don't take anybody else's.
That people say, why passiflora, passion flower? Passion flower is a very, very mild sedative, so it brings peace into your energy field. A passion flower, when you look at it, is all about the passion of Jesus Christ. So when you look at a passion flower, there's a triangle on the top. It's all symbolic of the last week of Jesus' life. There's 12 petals on the outside, the 12 apostles. The actual middle of the passion flower is the crown of thorns. Just look at a picture of a passion flower. A lot of them are blue and white, the colours of the Casa. Blue for the sky, for peace, and also the mantle of Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus. And there's 5 inner petals for the 5 wounds of Jesus. And a lot of them have threads hanging off them, which are symbolic of the scourging, of the whipping of the Christ before he was crucified. And the 3 nails are the triangle on the very top. So when you look at passion flower, the Casa chose this as a symbol of the Christ consciousness. We have the triangle in the Casa. It's the Trinity, which is sacred geometry, because everything in the universe is made up of triangles. We were talking about this the other day. So it's, a lady said to me yesterday, it's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which is great because she's Catholic. Here in the Casa, it's faith, love, and charity. Fe, amor, caridade. And also the triangle is a very powerful symbol. The Star of David is so above as below. It's inverted triangles. So as in heaven, so on earth. It's the transmutation of the energy. We're trying to get there. And when we're praying, the triangle is a very powerful symbol because the arm of the triangle is the base of the triangle, or the base is right there on the bottom. So on the earth, which is the base of the triangle, and our 2 arms are going heavenward. When we pray into the triangle, our third eye is connecting with the center of the triangle. So our crown chakra is aligned with the point of the triangle. So our crown chakra is asking for help through our the top of our bodies, going upwards, and the entities are just waiting to take our prayers to the different departments, because there's a saint for everything. And they're not all saints either. Being, so they all go spirit guide, whoever you want to call it. So they go to the different departments. If you're looking for a partner, get on to St. Anthony of Lisbon. I was telling you about that.
From you.
It works, believe me. Pray to him, and next thing you know, your partner will show up. And because Medium João was born Catholic, and Brazil was very much a Catholic country, I mean, there's more of a rise in evangelicalism now, but in the beginning, when the Jesuits came here, that's why the Our Father is recited and the Hail Mary, which is a vibrational prayer rather than full-on Catholic, but because Medium João is Catholic. And of course, a lot of the prayers that I say in the current, I volunteer in the first current room, the cleansing room of the Casa. A lot of the prayers I use are a-religious, or they're Buddhist prayers, or it's all a culmination of a high vibration as opposed to a dogma, this religion, that religion,
Yeah, I want to talk to that a little bit, because I'm somebody who
did not grow up religious, but my mom did put me in Catholic school for a few years because that was what worked best in our lives at the time. And there were many things that I did not enjoy about it, just innately. And I asked to be put in public school when I was kind of old enough. So like I had a bad taste in my mouth about Catholicism for several years, but I still considered myself spiritual the whole time through. And I just wanted to talk about that for a minute because coming here, I actually feel like I've experienced a large healing around any discordant energy that I experienced as a child being in Catholic school. I actually, I didn't like it when people used the word God for God. I like source and all that is, and other kind of more generic things because of the ideas that religion had put on it. And here, you're talking a lot about, we say the Our Father and we say the Hail Mary, and for me, a couple years ago, that would have been a big problem for me to come here and be able to hear that and then still be like, okay, can I still get what I want with all of this language around here that caused so many problems for me before. And I'm here to say, I feel like I had a tremendous healing the past few weeks around the language, and I see above it now to see what it is, and the vibration is what you're saying, the vibration of the prayers, and what we have going on here is it supersedes what we call religion, I think.
Yeah. Religion is the opium of the masses, as Karl Marx famously said. And there's a beautiful prayer here that we kind of adapted for the current while people are in meditation in the casa. And I tend to say it when I can, and it's God has no religion. There's only one religion, the religion of love.
For those folks listening, there's a video that plays in the main hall of the casa that shows many of the physical surgeries as John of God is performing them. And the two that you see over and over again are one in which he's scraping the eye with an instrument, and another where he's using another instrument up the nose. Do you have any insight as to why these two are used over and over again? And are they used for the same afflictions, or is that the surgery used for whatever affliction?
That's always a good question. Somebody might say to me, I'd like to have my back. And I always warn them, and I say, you may think it's your back, but the entities know where the root cause is. They're going to go for that, and that could be the Kelly clamp, the nose. Or it could be the eye scraping, or it could be somewhere completely different. So it doesn't mean that that's specifically it'll be a cut in the back. It could be that they work through using the Kelly clamp to get to other areas or release the energy or the healing. As long as one truly surrenders to the process, to just surrender to it, not resist it, there is no pain. As the entity says, I think maybe as their work is ever more strong, and that as humanity and people who are coming here are more open, then they need it less. Less is required. John of God himself, you may not know this, doesn't like seeing those videos. He can't watch them. And even though he did actually, the entities, he'd had a stroke at one point, and he was slightly incapacitated on the left arm. And so the entity incorporated many years ago, before I was here in 1987, I believe. And they cut below the heart here and sent energy in and stitched him up. Now, that was not him doing that. That was an entity incorporated in him. So when sometimes there's blood on him, we, get him a clean shirt or whatever. He never watches the videos of him doing surgery.
Wow.
So that shows that how fully incorporated he is. He wouldn't do it otherwise.
Who didn't understand that the entity can incorporate into John of God and has done surgery on John of God, the man.
I think, I know at the beginning there used to be, many trays of instruments and many hours. In fact, before my time, there were lines, down the street. And John of God would begin at 7 in the morning and finish at about 11 at night. And that's when the soup came in. It was a meal, and the mediums and people would stand. There were no seats. like there are now. And then when I started coming here, the rooms were very small, just 2 small rooms, the first current room and the spillover room in the last room, and very backless benches, so we had to sit up straight. You know, the casa has evolved and so much space, and John of God's, incredible generosity of always making it ever more comfortable and expansive for us. And I think people's faith has changed, and so they don't need to have a physical intervention. But even so, I think now people are more and more willing to understand that through our faith, as the entity says, No Ignacio says, faith moves mountains. Without faith, even mountains are heavy. And so I think for people that come the first time, at first it's like, what's happening? And there are all these questions. And then by the time they've been a couple of days or come a second time, they're really ready to accept. And more the entities are saying, soon there will be no need for the physical. People will accept it more. And of course, the work that's coming through, I think, as John of God being this impeccable instrument for the entities to work through. He always says he's never cured anybody. Who cures is God, but he is the impeccable instrument that the entities have been able to work with through and around for close to 70 years. I mean, he began when he was a little boy. And knowing that he's here every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or whenever he's needed, he is there willing and ready. And so it's really a testimonial to John of God's incredible devotion to God, to helping humanity, and his humbleness that he will just be ready to help anybody at any time as the impeccable instrument that he is, pristine and impeccable.
Coming here to Abidjania 15 years ago, next month, I mean, it was really life-changing. I've had so many experiences here because of the Casa de Dom Ignacio and Medium Joao doing this psychic surgery interventions where, he cuts without anesthetic. Not for the faint-hearted, but very real stuff, and I've seen it with my own eyes on many occasions. So every time I see an intervention, a physical intervention, I find it mind-blowing, and I've seen hundreds, if not thousands of them. I've been here a long time, and I volunteer at the Casa. I think it's 60 years now he's been working as a psychic surgeon, and he's completely illiterate. The man
60?
has no 60, yeah. He's 76 this year.
Yeah.
He incorporated when he was 14, but the physical interventions came just a little bit after that.
Sure.
He has no real schooling. So it's not even that he's doing the work of surgeon, he's doing the work of God.
Right.
Because he surrendered his body to God. It's God who heals.
Right.
Medium Joao is an instrument in God's hands. He's a farmer. And so he will say this, he lends his body to do this work. So that's where, the line is drawn. It's not himself,
Right.
which is hard to get your head around because you see him physically. Our physical vision is very limited. Right. I had a phenomenal healing last year with my eyesight. I'm over the age. I don't even know what age I am. I know I'm at least half a century. But anyway, so... and he stuck the point of the knife into my cornea, which I saw coming, and I felt absolutely nothing.
I'm sitting here with a disbelieved look on
I
my
know.
face. He sticks the point of the knife.
I mean, if anybody told me I would be here talking like this, I'd say, oh, she's on drugs or whatever. Still on drugs. So I'm really quite blown out of the water by what's going on here. I can't explain it, but it's really happening.
It's part of that tip of the iceberg thing that, sometimes we think we see the healing, and then we really, a lot of this is on the spiritual level, and you just can't see it with your physical eyes all the time. You can't.
No,
it's
we
not
see
tangible.
Nothing really with these eyes. We're very limited vision.
Right.
Limited. I used to do surrogate interventions for people all over the world, and I did
Tell us what that's like.
Well, for me, I'm not taking the energy on. I'm just used as a conduit or a channel for somebody on the other side of the world. And in the case that I did many of them, and now they don't do them because the energy is so powerful on the planet. Since 2012, there's been a massive awakening. I mean, you need to be dead not to feel it.
Right.
Now the entity does the work himself. The entity meaning medium Joao, as he incorporates these spirits into his body. Every intervention was different. So we represent people, meaning we bring their picture to medium Joao in entity. We ask, can we represent them in the intervention room in the casa, meaning can we send the energy to them, whatever they need. And we sit in the room at the time of the interventions with the picture of the person. However long the interventions will be, sometimes they're 15 seconds. The work is done in the blink of an eye, and sometimes they're longer, so it doesn't really matter. But we're attached to time, so we figure longer is better, but less is usually more, because you're in and out very quick. So I did this intervention for this girl, and it stuck in my mind because she had multiple sclerosis, and that was very close to my heart. My sister had multiple sclerosis. So I was given permission to do this for her. I sat in the intervention room. The intervention wasn't so long, maybe 20 minutes. And then 48 hours later, I got an email from her in Florida. She said that she got up after 24 hours and she couldn't stay up, so she went back to bed. So 48 hours later, she emailed me and she said she got up, looked in the mirror in Florida, and on the right side of her neck were 2 physical black stitches hanging out of her neck. So this is pretty mind-blowing. I asked her to send me a picture, and she said, I didn't tell anybody this, but she said, every time I have an MRI, the exact spot on my neck is where the symptoms of my multiple sclerosis come up. So these spirits went directly there. I mean, they physically manifested this, and it blew my mind. And I went to the casa and I said, this is impossible.
Clearly not.
They said, well, it happens more than you think it happens. So I was blown out of the water. So I realized that it's bigger than us at that time. I'd been here 5 years at that stage. So it's constantly evolving. That was probably a really massive turning point. Then I really got into the surrendering part of the work here, where anything is possible. So when she did her revision a week later in Florida, she was so excited. She said she was going to keep the stitches forever. And of course, God had other plans.
They just disappeared.
They disappeared.
They just disappeared.
I mean, people were looking at them. She sent me pictures. It was obvious that they were on her neck. I didn't know her. She wasn't making this stuff up. And she had a very beautiful healing here. She's never been to the casa. She's never come here. She was on the second story of a building. So her mother's theory that she got out the window, went down the drain pipe with multiple sclerosis, and went to the local hospital to get the stitches, didn't really cut it.
Didn't know.
I mean, her mother was freaked out, you know, because this is a phenomenon.
We're not used to that.
I mean, anything that is happening out of the ordinary, we just refuse to believe. And of course, here in the casa, there's a bust of Dom Ignacio, who's the patron of the casa. And underneath is written his words: for those who believe, no words are necessary. For those who do not believe, no amount of words are sufficient. And I mean, that says it all, because I could tell you stories till the cows come home. They're not trying to, you know, they call for doctors to witness, the physical doctors to witness.
The earth doctors, as
earth
some
doctors,
people say.
And who are missionaries and messengers of the divine, and they have a very big role to play, and it's their job to help others. And there's many non-physical doctors as well. But he calls for earth doctors to witness his work. He puts, well, I've been there more times than I've had hot dinners, water on the forceps, blessed water from the casa, in a glass on the forceps with cotton wool, and then takes the forceps out and puts it into a doctor's mouth and says, what is that? And they say, it is water. And then he takes it out of the doctor's mouth and shoves it up somebody's nose. And there's no infections.
Oh, my goodness.
So, you know, there's something bigger than us going on here. There's some dematerialization. There's protection from the higher planes. There's, you know, big stuff happening here. Because it's a calling here to Abidjan, and it's not for the faint-hearted. So it's like a pilgrimage. We're called here, and we surrender ourselves to the altar of the divine somehow, kicking and screaming usually, with no belief, O ye of little faith, like Thomas in the Bible, one of the apostles, when Jesus showed up with the wounds, holes in the hands and feet, and Thomas is like, no way, you're alive, and he says, show me the wounds, because he couldn't believe, and then Jesus said, Thomas, you have seen and you believe, but blessed are those who have not seen and who believe, which is beautiful.
He always tells people, please continue with your Western doctors and whatever medicines they prescribe until you and your doctors both agree that you no longer need any more medicine, need any more, medical treatment. Right. So he's always grateful to doctors, because doctors have helped him as well as the spiritual world. Yeah.
What the entities say, we must work with the medical and with the spiritual. They ask us to always remind people to continue to take their medications, go to their doctors for checkups, following their doctor's protocols and advice, and adding the Kaza protocols and following that clearly, which is what John of God does. He has his regular yearly checkups, etc.
There's an angel here called Angel Ishmael, and he has another phalange of light workers. Not that they're separate, they're on the same vibe, they're just here to help us. But their job, particularly, the Angel Ishmael's job particularly, is to work with obsessions, which we all have. The Kaza is the biggest de-obsession house in South America. So this particular phalange or group of entity light workers work with Ishmael for addictions, drug, alcohol, the Irish problems. Eating disorders, porn addiction, all of the nasty obsessions, and these are the spirits that want to do us harm. And we're all suffering here on planet Earth. We're not perfect, we're all carrying energies that don't serve us, and we need to learn these lessons. So our addictions are an opportunity for growth. We need to see them as blessings, even though we think they're a curse. Right. And also a lot of really heavy energy comes in with alcohol and drugs. Heroin is the worst. The Kaza have phenomenal healing with these addictions. Also, they don't want you to use the Kaza as the Betty Ford clinic. Right. And we do have to bring ourselves into the healing equation. You have to do some work. You can't just come here and expect the entities to heal you. Heal me. Why didn't I get healed? You need to follow the protocol of the Kaza. You're given herbs. Some people ask for help with alcohol addiction, but they won't give up alcohol to take the herbs, because there's no alcohol and no chilies. I'm having a hard time with chilies at the moment. The alcohol I managed to squash, but or transmute the energy. Sure. You don't put it away until another day when it hits you. You actually have to face the demons. Well,
now you've got me on cookie addiction.
I know.
My son Charles, so thanks for that.
Yeah, I'm a cookie dealer now. I've turned from drug dealer to cookie dealer.
Good.
So this is the work of the Kaza, and they're transmuting the denser energies.
We need to integrate until revision.
Revision is the process in which a visitor who has had a spiritual intervention during their time at the Casa passes before the entity again to determine whether additional healing work is required.
Sometimes people go back before revision and the entity will say, not yet, they can't have another one. Then after revision, because there might still be some sutures internally that we don't know about that still need healing. And some people might find that after their intervention, perhaps Saturday they feel a lot of energy, and then Sunday they may feel a little bit of the pain that they had before, a little bit stronger. But that's part of the healing. And then by Tuesday, Wednesday, that's transformed. But that's just reminding us to go lie down, go rest, go support the healing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And with my group, I just had a small group this past 2 weeks, and they've gone now. But everyone had different experiences in different places. Some people had very profound experiences in their rooms while they were resting during the 24 hours after an intervention, or not even then, during the night. One person kept having recurring experiences in crystal baths, and another woman just the same thing with the waterfall. The waterfall was just extraordinarily cleansing for her. And, you know, I don't think there's any rhyme or reason necessarily. They just find you, they work on you when you need it or when you're ready for it. I know that my first experience at Omega, I had the experience of being worked on my neck, through my neck. And my neck has felt great since then. That was back in October. Just this morning, I took a crystal bath, and it felt like they were back in there working on my neck during the crystal bath, but not during the last 2 interventions the last 2 weeks, but today, you know, good however many days after my intervention. So like you said.
Yes, it's a continuity, and exactly, yeah. You can think of the casa being the hospital, and the room is our intensive care, if you will. You know, you have a couple of days where you're sipping ginger ale and eating lightly, whereas here we can eat, you know, the regular food, but it's just that 24 hours of introspection, silence, and being off, you know, computers and stuff, distractions, let's say, is so important for the healing process.
As a group, we heard from Melinda, who tells casa stories every week to folks here. And she mentioned that, you know, she was telling us a story or a couple of stories of folks who had shown up not knowing that John of God was going to be traveling. And they showed up in Abidjania and were quite disappointed to see that he was gone. And nevertheless had profound healings without the man himself being here to incorporate the entities. And I've heard that from a few other people now that I've spoken with, just how powerful Abidjania still is, even while John of God, the man, is traveling and incorporating elsewhere in the world.
That's right.
Amazing.
Yes. And even some years ago when he was in hospital, we do the same thing as we would do, you know, call the lines and everything else. And John of God would send a message on my iPhone, and I would connect it to the speaker system, and he would tell everybody to start the work, and he was focusing on the work as well. And so as he was being treated in the hospital, it was so powerful here, and everybody went through, sat in the current for 10 minutes and then left, and it was just extraordinary. It was nobody complained, and everybody had just a very, very profound experience. That is something also a testimonial of his dedication. You know, he came out of hospital and we were scheduled to go to Omega, and I said, well, I'm canceling Omega, and he said, absolutely not. I gave my word and I'll go. Wow. And so just 10 days after his surgery, we were at Omega.
When was that? That was
2015.
Right.
We go through our lives and we have many extraordinary experiences. And I notice a little bit here that people are always, not everybody, but the search is, you know, I've been to the sacred waterfall, and the first experience is very moving for people. Sometimes it's the first time they've ever been in a waterfall, and sometimes it's a very powerful release, transformation. And I notice that people keep going back and back and back and back, trying to either relive that and it's not necessary. If we go once to the sacred waterfall, it's plenty, but we don't want to disappoint ourselves for trying to get a little bit hooked on that experience.
I was just there this morning.
Me too.
Missed you. I think human nature is just when we feel something incredible, we often want to repeat it, whether it's with a taste of something that we love or some kind of high, however induced, and certainly spiritual experiences. I'm one of those people that my whole life kind of revolves around spirituality, but I don't have very tangible, super involved experiences necessarily, like something that you would describe somebody's first time at the waterfall and they felt X, Y, Z and they want to go back and back and back. Right. But I love hearing about them, and I know that it's possible to have those. Yeah. And it's lovely to hear about them.
Yeah.
Some folks who are maybe new to John of God are probably wondering, wow, what does it cost to come to the casa? And it doesn't cost anything to visit the casa and to go in the lines and pass by Medium Zhao or John of God. There are incidental costs, of course, of getting here to Brazil, of staying in hotels, of using the services of a tour guide. And if you decide to use,
crystal bath sessions.
And the herbs, but yeah, has he ever charged for any of his healings?
Never. I mean, there have been times when he has gone abroad and done events, and so of course people have to buy tickets to the events because they have to rent a hall, and it's just a big, very complicated thing to get it set up. So there are expenses for that. So people pay to attend.
Sure.
But the actual work, he's never charged for that.
Wow.
Ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
The more I come here, the more I realize that one knows nothing. The more I realize, less I know about anything, really. So these are our experiences. But when you're with somebody like John of God and the entities of light who know so much beyond what we know, it's just such a privilege to be able to walk this path and be here in Abadiani at this time.
It was such an honor to visit the Casa and share space with these amazing guests. And we'll hear more from them in part 2, which is also available right now. Just so you know, these first 2 episodes are a bit longer than our future episodes, but we wanted to start the show with something really special. Thanks so much for going on this journey with us as we launch our show. Our show is entirely listener supported, and as a special thank you to our first patrons on Patreon, anyone that signs up to support us during our first month, May 2018, will be entered to win one of 2 beautiful crystals that I brought back with me from Abadiania, Brazil, which were both blessed by John of God and the entities. And there's some real power coming out of them. I gave one to my producer Zoe, and she loves it, and it's sitting on her computer right now.
Thanks for listening to our first episode. Our second episode, which is also available now, finishes our 2-part pilot focused on the Spiritual Healing Center Casa de Dom Ignacio de Loyola by shifting focus onto the lives and work of guests Josie Raven, Heather Cumming, and Granny McEntee. You can find links to more information about this week's guests at letsgetmeta.com. Let's Get Metaphysical is a production of Hana Healing Arts. Your host is Renata Maniaci. Production, editing, and sound engineering by Zoe Ravenwood of Hatfish Digital Media. The voice of the credits is me, Aries. This episode's theme music was Ambient Cool by Sunchaser. If you like our show, please consider supporting us on Patreon, which you can find a link to, along with our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages on our website, letsgetmeta.com. Is there a topic that you'd like us to explore in a future episode? Or would you like to share any thoughts on your personal experiences regarding something we covered on the show? Want to give general show feedback? Tell us what's on your mind by emailing us at info@letsgetmeta.com. Please let us know if you're okay with us reading the comment on the show, and if so, please include what name you'd like us to use, how to pronounce it, as well as what pronouns we should use while referring to you.